I was just going to ask something to Pete about what you said. I mean, with respect to what you said there, Sue, I mean, I don't know a lot about it, and, you know, I know people here who don't know loads about it, so although we may sort of initially care, I think we are learning a lot, actually. And with regard to what Pete said about, I think it's very interesting what you were saying about how kind of white people have hijacked, you know, the little tiny bit at the end of slavery to say, oh, you know, well, and then we abolished it, as if that's kind of some great thing. But you said about economic interests. How much do you think it's that, and how much the slave rebellions? Because I thought it's interesting what, I call you James, I know you're not James, you're the acting James Watkins, but what you were saying about political movements. I mean, if we could hear more about the actual slave rebellions and how important you think that is.
I think that's probably an area that Washington probably more expert in than myself. My source of information, if you wanted to look it up, would be Eric Williams with regard to the economics.
In fact, I think in the States there are about 43 free towns, aren't there?
The rebellion story and the rebellion chapter in freeing enslaved Africans goes back way even before parliaments here began to look about doing any form of amelioration, as was the word then, mean to do something for people who they consider subhuman. And some of the earliest rebellions even started on the ship Zong, which I think it was even in the news sometime last year, whereby there actually now was the estate for that ship. It came back into the Court of Appeal, whereby a rebellion was on that ship, and there were some big rebellion, and the captain ordered that so many, I think 152 slaves being thrown overboard, and for some reason it came back into the court. But rebellion started even before the Africans were taken aboard. So to look at the whole history and the complexity of rebellions and how it falls within how Africans have freed themselves, it is a very important aspect of the history which is not being taught, because my opinion is that it is still, as Pete is saying, that it is Europeans who abolished slavery and they gave us our freedom, and hence why bother to highlight that. The other issue about the rebellion story is that it didn't come only in the form of violence. We're talking about moving highly technocrat from Africa. We're talking about doctors. If you do see this book, Slavery and Medicine, read it. You're talking about a host of engineers, people who were highly skilled, who move across the continent, and they had different ways of communicating and rebellious during the period. So it's not this antagonistic thing we are talking about. We are looking at silent rebellion, we are looking at open rebellion, and we are looking at rebellion also, which even the whites themselves colluded to when they realized that for economic benefits, if they don't cooperate with the enslaved people, they will end up losing it all. But in the end, they actually lost it. So to answer your question, I think you have to look at the different phases and the different methods of how the enslaved people rebel to get a very true picture. And I must use this opportunity to say that there is this stereotyping that African people tend to be antagonistic and over-articulated because we were rebellious. It's not true. It is a fact that most of our biological makeup and the different tribal and ancestry which we are from, we have more melanin in our bloods and we have other characteristics which we have fought against so many different opportunities to reach where we are. And it didn't come easy. And hence, we have to continue to fight. And it has been interpreted as being antagonistic. We are not. We're just a proud people. And one of the best ways of articulating ourselves is through our passion. And it has been interpreted as being antagonistic.
It's interesting, just sorry, on the rebellion front as well, there was a ship called the Industry, which was a successful rebellion, which was captured and taken back to Sierra Leone. The Zong, in fact, wasn't a rebellion. It was a mistake by the captain, a terrible mistake, but awful, because he actually got to where he thought he was long before he did, and then carried on. And so basically everyone was running out of water on board the ship. And he realised that if he threw the slaves overboard, he could claim insurance money. But if they died naturally, he couldn't. So literally the people who were thrown overboard chained together. And when the case came before the High Court, the judge said, well, these just like horses. Why is this case a murder case? So, I mean, again, it shows you just that incredible sort of lack of perception at the time.
Anybody from the audience have a question or a comment they'd like to make?
I'm just myself today, I'm not a councillor today. I've just got one point to make about the economics of the cotton industry in Lancashire, because if you look behind you, you'll see two ladies there in a room full of looms. We mustn't forget that our own local people were actually slaves as well, because they were on very poor earnings, and my grandfather was put on short time. No, they weren't, but they were still used as low-paid workers with very long hours. My grandmother used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning as a small girl, below 10, to take her father's breakfast to the mill, in clogs, and on the Sundays her clogs were put into pawn, because they were so poor. So we've not to forget about the local people. They did also suffer, you know.
May I make a point?
Never has any black person denied the hardship, but the word is not slaves. Asian people coming out of India, Pakistan, which now India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, were indentured slaves. Eventually, maybe possibly, they could have their freedom. The hardship of industrial England is there, it's in the book, it's noted, it's rectified, 0 generations on. But with absolutely no disrespect, nobody came to your grandmother in the night to stockpile through sexual rape. Nobody castrated, a man in this town because he looked at a white woman. The differences are huge. We're not living in a past. I think what we're trying to do is make an awareness of this history, because it's not enough for the abolition of the slave trade to go into the curriculum, because it's only the polish of the story. What's her face with the dreadful makeup, the newswoman, the black woman? Moira! Who got sacked, didn't she? Moira was not ours, bless her. But Moira was the good black woman on TV, wasn't she? She was respected. And what did Moira do before she was sacked? She did a show on Wilberforce, didn't she? And she criticised Wilberforce. And then Moira was sacked. Isn't that funny? Isn't that odd?